Ready or Not is a truly fascinating game both in and out of the world of the fictional city of Los Sueños. It started development about 8 years ago and in 2017 was shown to the world with an incredible reveal trailer. It was going to be the Siege Killer, the spiritual successor to SWAT 4, and basically the world's hopes for an authentic, grounded, tactical FPS were laid on its shoulders. 3 years later, we got an abysmally bad PvP alpha for what everybody assumed was going to be a co-op game. And then 3 years after that, we got an official release of the co-op exclusive version of the base game on Steam. Now it's 2025 and the game has seen 2 DLC releases and is probably in the best state it's ever been. I've been following this game all that time from the very start in 2017 when the trailer released and I was a freshman in high school. And I just started my first YouTube channel, which will hopefully never see the light of day again. And now, when the game is actually released and good, I'm almost through college and am 3/4 of a year into an entirely different YouTube channel. This game has been a long-term project, and the fact that it exists at all is incredible. And that's one of many reasons we're going to be talking about it today. I'm not one of the old heads who was looking for SWAT 5. I didn't know anything about Rainbow Six before Siege, but never before had I tracked a game so thoroughly as this one. And when I finally purchased the game in early access in February of 2023, I played it a bit, decided, yeah, this is alright, I guess. And that one level sure was messed up, and then essentially didn't touch it again until just recently. This seems to be a fairly common experience. I have about 24 people on my Steam friends list who've played the game before, but only 2 of them have more than 100 hours, and a bit less than half even have more than 20. It seemed to me, like it did to plenty of them, that Ready or Not was one of 2 things. Either one, it was a good-looking game with good gunplay, but it was co-op and you couldn't shoot everybody you saw, therefore boring. Or 2, that super edgy game from any number of "Ready or Not is so dark it made me shit myself" videos. And before I continue, I'm not actually dissing anybody who made one of those videos. The game is dark, and talking about those topics in regards to it is interesting. There's just quite a lot of that video about the game, so this one's going to be a little different. You see, when I came back to the game about a month ago, it was out of an essentially random desire just to see where the game was. I wanted to play a tactical shooter, but wasn't really feeling PvP, and respected myself too much to reinstall Siege. One of the main things that had even gotten me interested in Ready or Not in the first place was that it seemed like it'd basically be the terrorist hunt mode from Rainbow Six Siege if more than 3 picoseconds of thought had been put into it. But I digress. It was essentially a random reinstall because I just didn't want to buy a new game. And then I started playing.
Get down on the floor right now. You know what that means? I don't know who that was.
I cleared the first level, which takes place in a gas station, and it wasn't particularly hard. There's only a couple suspects, they're not well armed or armored, and I'm not too bad at FPSs, so it wasn't that much of a concern. But then I went to pick up the evidence. I even knew this part already. I found the dead manager, found the kid, found the deceased veteran, all stuff that I already knew about from the beta, and the sorts of things I'd seen other videos cover as well. And then I started really looking around. You see, every level in Ready or Not is like one of those iceberg charts. There are 4 levels, I would say. There's what you see the first time you play it, when you're experiencing it for the first time and you're just focused on staying alive. Then there's the second layer, which is when you actually read the briefings and see the 911 call that resulted in SWAT being dispatched to the situation. This might occur on your first playthrough, especially after you've beaten the level and you're just wandering around looking for guns and then get bored. Or maybe it'll happen when you're playing with friends or when you're trying to achieve a perfect score, but you get it. Then there's the third level, which happens when you actually start to look around the levels once you finish them. You see that in the gas station level, for example, it seems that the manager's employees actually quite like him. One of them even asks if Mudassir, his name, if he's okay. And, well, you might just feel something. You know he very well isn't okay. You heard the phone call.
Are you there?
Hello!
Sir?
No! No! No!
you also notice just how much ends up having been put into these environments. There are quarterly building inspections, tons of fake brands for soft drinks and chips and all other sorts of products. There's even a Nat Geo ripoff that sits in a little corner that you'd never find unless you were specifically looking for little details like that. If you've played other just games in general that take place in a modern or sort of futuristic setting, you're probably used to background signage, fake brand names, and all that sort of thing being so low res most of the time as to be illegible, or so frequently repeated with so little effort that they basically become as interesting as drywall. But in this game, pretty much every background detail is legible. You can read the posters, and that alone is a level of detail that other games just don't tend to have. But then comes the even deeper level, the fourth level, at which we get into the broader connected context between most of the levels in this game and the unlocks you get for completing the levels at S tier. Now, I suffered for all of you, dear audience, and beat every single level non-lethally, which involves beating them with shotgun-launched beanbags until the suicide bomber somehow determines that surrendering willingly is the thing he's gonna do. It wasn't easy, and the post office level still haunts my nightmares. So these last two levels of the iceberg are our focus, and so rather than divide the rest of the video up by level, I'm going to divide it up by plot line, which the game has neatly laid out for us with its achievements. The Decaying City, the Left Behind, the War, the Exploited, and the Abducted. The War is the one that we're going to start with, as that gas station level is a part of it, and by the image on the achievement, you can probably guess what the theme is. So, off to Twisted Nerve we go. Here we have the house of some people on illicit substances. Most of the suspects are jumpy, they're fairly tough, but not all that unwilling to surrender, and not very good shots even if they don't. There's plenty of fun details, crazed drawings, and the general vibe of a horrifically run-down housing area, and then we get the first hint at what is meant by it being part of the war. There are whiteboards up talking about a group called the Los Locos, and maps of destinations and drainage. A little sussy. The next one is Rust Belt, and what looks like a little ranch house turns into a horrifying sweep through the cartel tunnels from hell. And things become a little more clear. The Los Locos, of course, are a cartel, and this ranch is where Coyote, which you can guess what that might be, is shuttled between the US and Mexico. We get inside, and there are confiscated passports and this grimly beautiful shrine to the Virgin Mary. And that's our last bit of light before we descend into darkness. So we fight in the Viet Cong tunnels for a little while, but on the way might notice what seems to be the remnants of a Native American civilization within them. And then the showstopper is opening the doors deep inside and finding a whole cave system that they've been boating through to even get across. It's a pretty incredible reveal. By this point, those of you familiar with the game might have taken note of the fact that we're doing these levels out of order. If we didn't, then we wouldn't be talking about Rust Belt for a while. The levels in this game aren't arranged as to make the story clear, but to provide a fairly straightforward difficulty progression, though it's not all that straightforward. But now, with all the levels from The War complete, we can get back to those evidences I was talking about, and we can see what exactly they were and what exactly they tell us. We can tell right away that this approach to the game might be intended, as evidences are arranged by these achievement categories, not by the order in which you actually play them in the game, nor chronologically by date. But this section leaves us with 9 items. A teddy bear, Mudasir's name tag, and an attack plan from the gas station, certain kind of paraphernalia, a text exchange, and a drawing by the unfortunate child in Twisted Nerve, and then a piece of the ancient rock, a listing of the Border Patrol agents the cartel was watching, and texts regarding the underground cave system, and then something about a crying child is mentioned in that one as well, which is kind of creepy. While that might be a throwaway detail, that, much like Los Locos in general, may come to be important later. But next, we'll hit on the Decaying City. These, in my opinion, are really good levels, but they don't have quite as much going on plot-wise to talk about, at least not in terms of the insane stuff I'm going to be talking about later. The first of them is the Elephant, which was one of many controversial levels in this game. I'm really having to tiptoe a bit in this video. Anyway, we show up at Watt College, and what I want to focus on here is that once you wipe out the perps and disable the bombs, there is a massive, extremely detailed building to explore. And that's kind of insane considering this is the one level that you must go fast on to prevent civilians from being executed. The fact that there's all this detail in such a short level where you can't stop to look at the details is pretty admirable. Next is Neon Tomb, which is one of 2 levels attacked by Yemeni terrorists. It's pretty horrific, honestly. Lots and lots of bodies. But, well, the layout is inspired by John Wick, so you know what we gotta do. And with that one out of the way, we've then got Relapse. I get flashbacks on this one every time I think about it. It took me 4 hours to beat it the normal way for the first time, but then for some reason I was able to S tier it the first attempt. This level is arcane. And that, of course, is for many reasons, as some of the suspects dress up like nurses. This was most painfully clear in one attempt where one of the nurse suspects held an actual nurse hostage, and I got a headshot on the wrong one. Regardless, in my recorded attempt, I didn't quite succeed at capturing the leader alive like we were supposed to, unless he can walk this off. Anyway, the evidence here depends on the level. On the first one, the elephant, we've got a student's backpack, which makes us sad, antidepressants, which call attention to the mental health crisis in the city, which is definitely the theme of that level, and then the manifesto of one of the shooters, which of course is sort of reminiscent of what we tend to see in those events. The next 2 consist of more paraphernalia and plans from the terrorists, and memorabilia might not be the right word, but some stuff from the civilians present during the massacres. With the Decaying City, the feeling is basically societal collapse, constant threat, and mental health crisis. With that plotline finished, we now move to the Left Behind. This one starts with a great intro level, a lethal obsession. This is the one that I show to people when I explain just how detailed the levels in this game are, also maybe because I can do this to them. But there are tons of drawings around, tons of details, very funny diagrams of police officers, and then, of course, the Fed chart. There is a through line here, though, about the USIA, the game's CIA equivalent, though, which our main suspect is an ex-member of. But I'm sure that that isn't important. After that are 2 associated missions, Ides of March and Sins of the Father. One takes place across hotel rooms, the other across a penthouse. Both are about a veteran-turned-extremist group, the Left Behind, who have sought the assassination of a major politician after he supported a bill to defund support for veterans. And it's here that the game definitely hits on a fairly relevant modern topic. These are some really good levels, but not connected to the big thing in of themselves, though the way they are portrayed and the setups of the levels are no less grand. Especially in Sins of the Father, where the vibe is immaculate. And in the room where the Left Behind plan to execute the politician and his family, you can hear a distorted version of the American national anthem, and the sound... And the soundtrack that plays as you wanders the corridors is just properly haunting. The last of these, however, is a departure, the Carriers of the Vine, which gives us an almost Waco-like scenario. It's a religious organization that takes in women who've been assaulted and converts them into a misandrist, violent ideology. They end up being fairly sympathetic, actually, given the types of people that they target, and yet they kill an officer and have been growing increasingly aggressive and, as said, violent, so it's not a huge surprise that it turns out the way that it does. It is, however, a beautiful level, probably my favorite in the game aesthetically. Now, while there are tons of evidence pieces across these levels, for the sake of conserving our time and focusing on that which is particularly relevant, I'm just going to call attention to these 3. The challenge coin from A Lethal Obsession, Johnson's personal effects, and the insurance paper. All of these have this odd thing in common. The CIA, I mean USIA. The connection to the one that belonged to Raskins, the letter, I think is incredibly significant to something we'll talk about later. The fact that the leader of the misandrist cult was a former USIA agent is pretty important. The craziest thing is the back of the insurance letter talks about some sort of monsters that have been unleashed by the USIA in cryptic fashion, but then it also has the player character's last name, Beaumont, written on it. That also, I'm sure, has no later relevance and is not at all related to what I'll be building up towards. I guess one could argue over whether to do the exploited or the abducted next, but I'm gonna go with the former simply because parts of it lead to the latter, as it's really that grouping of missions in which everything comes together. So the first of the exploited is the renowned 23 megabytes a second, the literal stream sniping mission. Except that you're actually swatting this guy for a pretty good reason. You're told by the streamer in the 911 call that he's killed his mom and is about to kill his brother, so in you go. You find a server room on the second floor, which is suspicious enough, but then you get to the streamer's room and there's a lot to find, most of it bad and not all for the same reason. So there is a bunch of stuff in here. Posters, a D&D table, and the gaming setup at which you can see chat freaking out over this guy, whose streamer name is Milky Toes, being swatted. You look on his other monitor and he's messaging someone called Kawaii Floof about very suspicious looking pictures. Then of course we go to the drawer and see exactly why there were children on his Discord. What can I say except average Twitch streamer? At least he wasn't playing Minecraft. The other thing that's in here that I'm not a huge fan of, however, kind of goes outside the bounds of the game, and you might know about this. There's some AI slop. I guess you could say, oh, well, the streamer is a creep, so of course he has bad taste. Which kind of makes sense, but there's bits of it sprinkled in the game, much like if someone took a piss on a wedding cake. It might still look nice, but you really don't want to partake very much anymore. So much of the game is so extremely high effort. The soundtrack for this level, just as an example, might be the best one in the game. So seeing that kind of thing is just disappointing. Though it doesn't negate the work put into all the other areas of the game, it leaves a pretty bad taste in my mouth. I get commissioning art for all of the tons of background media that are only looked at for a brief second would be really expensive, but the game has made a ton of money, so I don't know. I felt the need to acknowledge that it exists. It's really only in this level in any quantity, so maybe they'll phase it out over time. I'd much prefer that in any case. Anyway, the next of these is Sinuous Trail. So from that Discord screenshot we saw, we're led to the Mindjot server farm, where falling stock prices have devastated the company so bad that they're selling their modern Western hardware for Chinese knockoffs and also trafficking in illegal data, some of which they very clearly know about given the existence of this damning little notepad. That notepad plus what's found in the servers leads us to The Spider, a child talent agency. Wow, absolutely nothing wrong or suspicious from the get-go here, huh? We also get our first encounter with Bolton Security, the enemies in this level, who just seem to go for the worst of clients. Here we're looking for a certain George Brixley who provided the photos we saw in the Discord chat. And yeah, Brixley looks about like what you would expect, and this place is pretty horrible. But not as horrible as Valley of the Dolls, which is the level you've heard of in regards to this game. You know what it is, I know what it is, and since I've already S-tiered the game and don't need the footage here to be of perfect runs, I'm hunting Amos Vole, the ringleader of the whole operation, down. In any case, what I actually want to focus on is what you probably don't know about this level. That Amos Vole's daughter, Janie, is having a pretty rough go of it. It seems like the mother knows what's going on in the basement, but the daughter clearly doesn't. And yet, Amos Vole is already an adult film director too, and she just turned 18, and he invited a bunch of people she doesn't know. It's not looking like he wants her to become a doctor exactly. Good thing we're here to fix the problem. After said problem has been fixed, we might see Janie's room. She's an environmentalist and even has a page open about the same cave drawings we saw earlier. which is a pretty cool tie-in. She's also selling the car her father gave her to charity, which almost implies he might know where she got the money from, but it's hard to say for sure. Either way, in the Diddy basement, it's about as bad as you've heard, and while the picture room, the recording room, and the collage room are all pretty sickening, I think it's the barrels that get me. Maybe it's the flies that buzz around them. Also, sometimes civilians end up down here, which is one of the reasons I'm a little suspicious of anyone that's in this level except for the daughter. Now we're out of that god-forsaken house, we can talk evidence. The first one is an anime figurine with a number of different DNA sources on it. So we'll just put that away. The next one is a rig for mining crypto, and then a police report about the streamer's misbehavior. Well, at least we fixed that. Then we've got a 250 terabyte drive of absolutely nothing good at all, a resignation letter from a MindJot employee who decided he didn't want to be part of this, and a ransom note telling someone to bring the drive to North Hills. Don't worry, we're about to be seeing North Hills. Anyway, from the spider, we get a poster about how the Child Talent Agency used to be a safe injection center. The setup almost speaks for itself. We get a very creepy scheduling book for children at the talent agency, which leads me to believe, given how desperate the situation is in Los Sueños, that some parents have been willing to do pretty unspeakable things to get by. But it's only downhill from here. Next is the Mysterious Inquiry, which is very weird. It mentions Vol and Brixley, then has seals that seem to depict things that have happened or will happen. We're going to talk about what that all led up to later. As for Valley of the Dolls, we have three very different evidence pieces. First is an employee ID for Bolton, which there's not anything particularly special about. There's Janie's diary, which was kind of hard to read, but talks about how much she hates her dad, wants to move out, and loves her friends. And then a creepy-ass painting with the worst thing ever written on the back of it. I don't want to think about that ever again, so let's keep digging and discuss the final set of base game levels, the Abducted. The first of these is Ends of the Earth, which is one of the most separate levels in the game. It doesn't have that much to do with anything else. It's about a Vietnamese immigrant family who, after going into massive debt paying to care for their mother's cancer treatments, get into arms dealing. Their only connection to what we're about to talk about is that they've been selling to our old friends, the Los Locos, but given the family itself's understandable reasons, I tend to play this one non-lethal. After that, we've got Greased Palms, the bane of anybody, including myself, trying to S-tier the game. This one involves going into a post office where there's been a shooting and finding a ton of cartel members. Remember the Los Locos? This is where we find their end of the connection to the Twisted Nerve people from way back at the beginning. The trick here, though, is that there's a FISA, the in-game FBI agent here, who seems to not be on our side and might have been involved in the shooting. It's all very strange. After that, however, we move on to Buy Cheap, Buy Twice, which is that North Hills place I was talking about, one of my favorite levels in the game. We're sent in there after there were shootings at this used car lot, which might have resulted in the death of an undercover agent. And in combination with intel that they might be trafficking weapons, we get sent in. We clear out the garage and find the arms, but we also locate suspects speaking Russian, either calling us all sorts of profanities that I can't translate on YouTube for you, and calling us stupid Americans. Other than that, they say such things as, "Они здесь, давай же," or "Я слушаю," when arresting them, which means, "They're here, get away," and "I'm listening," respectively. I'm not just a stupid American, I can kinda speak Russian, and that becomes useful after we get to the room with our agent and find out that they aren't just trading guns and drugs, but also people. We weren't supposed to find that, and in here there's a radio that is playing some sort of story in Russian. It's then I remember I am not fluent enough to understand what exactly is going on. There's something about a grandfather, someone not contacting home in a while, and maybe a goat. If you speak better Russian than me, let me know what's being said.
Ой, вы, дедушки мои, козлятушки, на что отпирались, отворялись, злому волку доставались. Услыхал это волк, входит в избушку и говорит козе.
It all comes to a head with Hide and Seek, the last mission of the base game. It takes place at a port, and in separate sections of it, FBI, HRT, the ATF, and SWAT will all be raiding. You know, there's a big transnational deal going on, and considering what we found in the last level, we can kind of guess at what we might see. Or not, really. We open some shipping containers and find guns, drugs, and all that sort of thing. Then we open a shipping container that I can definitely not show you the contents of, and are told to close the door by a FISA agent. We reluctantly comply, go further, and finally we find the spider that we've been chasing since Brixley Talent Time. I did not know about this part coming back to the game, so this got me pretty damn good. Of course, we finish clearing out the level, head back, and that seems to be it. But now, this is when I tell you that our main character, Judge, is a bioengineered super officer designed by the US government. No, really. All of the ex-federal agents, their fixation on you, the fact that in the last level of the second DLC you blow open a wall to a listening post by the Mariposa Lily organization, which is mentioned in slight detail in some of the evidences. What even is the Mariposa Lily organization? Oh yeah, just an organization working with the USIA, and also they have a listening post in your home base who is responsible for a psyop affecting the cops of Los Sueños. Can you see the tinfoil hat on my head? A lot of this cycles all the way back to Lethal Obsession, where there's a throwaway poster that's evidently not a throwaway about LSD-related experiments to make the perfect police officer. Then combine the fact that some of our former USIA agents know about and fear Judge, and even seem to know he's coming, and things just completely get insane. Then we've got that creepy painting, and FISA telling us to close the crate, and there's some seriously weird shit going on. And then, just to top off the fact that this still isn't over, not only does that last DLC level have that secret room, but the briefing itself is super weird. It isn't a phone call, it's some strange connection Judge has to bring SWAT to this distant island to interrupt a trade deal between a South American cartel and an ex-paramilitary organization, which itself is super shady and has a chemical weapon that is apparently fake. All I'm saying is that Ready or Not is an incredibly insane game. It shouldn't even exist, shouldn't be good, and definitely should not have this crazy of lore. But I hope you enjoyed hearing about it, because whatever will cause this trail to meet its end, potentially in future DLC, I'd like to be there to cover it. And anyway, if you have any thoughts of your own about this game or its lore, I read every comment and would love to see it. In addition, every like and subscription goes a long way since we're still small here at JBat. We also have a Discord if you want to hang out with my editor and I, and a Patreon if you're crazy enough to want it, where we post all of our videos a week early. I would also like to thank Shadowrunner and Sonny, our Knights of the Inner Circle, Nico, our Knight, and Greer, our loyal squire. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed, and remember,